18. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged it in the earth, and hid his Lord's money." This evening, I want to talk to you about being a good steward. Being a good steward. Dear Father, thank you for all you've given to us. Lord, I ask you to fill me with the Holy Ghost and give me the words that you want me to say. Lord, help us to see the things that you've given to us, Lord, each and every one of us, and help us to become good stewards of them, Lord. I know there's some areas, as I was studying this, there's some areas in my life, Lord, where I need to work on. And I ask that you give us the grace and the strength to be able to work on these areas and become better stewards of what you've given us. In your name we pray, amen. You know, I was reading this passage, and, you know, we talked about last Sunday night, just briefly, we talked about what a steward was. A steward, the dictionary says, one to whose care or honor anything has been instructed. Another definition is a curator, a guardian. Another one says a steward or manager of a household or of lands. Another dictionary says an overseer. I was thinking about that. I read this passage and I'm thinking, you know, there's 3 things that God has given to each and every person on earth. He's given us all time, talents, and treasure. Time, talents, and treasure. And I want to talk about those with you tonight. First of all, time. Time. Our lives are short. James 4:14 says, "Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor, that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away." A vapor, you put a pot of water on the stove, you let it start boiling, and then you see that steam rising up, and that's a vapor. If you try and concentrate on one little wisp of it, you see it for a second, and it's gone. And God says, your life, that's what it is. It's here and then it's gone. Our lives are short. James Dobson says, "If we fully comprehend the brevity of life, our greatest desire would be to please God and to serve one another." So since our lives are so short, we ought to use our time wisely. You've probably heard the illustration. It goes like this. If you had a bank that credited your account each morning with $86,000 that carried over no balance from day to day, allowed you to keep no cash in your account, and every evening canceled whatever part of the amount you failed to use during that day, what would you do? Draw out every cent every day, of course, and use it to your advantage. Well, you have such a bank, and its name is time. Every morning it credits you with 86,400 seconds. Every night it rules off as lost whatever of this you failed to invest to good purpose. It carries over no balances. It allows no overdrafts. Each day it opens a new account with you. If you fail to use the day's deposits, the loss is yours. There's no going back. There's no drawing against tomorrow. Ephesians 5:15 and 16, it says, "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil." Hey, our lives are short. God has given us something to each and every one of us, and that's time. And so we ought to use it wisely. We ought to use it wisely when training our children. You know, there's times where training my children, I look for teachable moments. My daughter, I'll be talking to my dad, and my daughter will run up. And have you ever been in a conversation with someone before, and it's a really either a deep conversation or you're really into this conversation, you're interested, the other person is interested, and then their little kid comes up and starts talking to them, and the person you're talking to loses focus on you and starts having a conversation with their kid? How rude is that? I absolutely hate that. Whenever my daughters do that, I'm talking to my dad and my daughters interrupt, I'll stop my dad for a second and I'll apologize to him. I'll turn to her, I'll tell her, "Don't interrupt me when I'm speaking to someone, please." And then I'll turn back. I don't care what she wants at this moment. Unless she's screaming, unless she's in pain and bleeding, she'll get over it. It'll be fine. I turn to my dad, I apologize again, and we continue with our conversation. It's a teachable moment. It's teaching her respect. It's teaching her patience. With our children, we ought to find those teachable moments. Studies have been done that say a child's character is largely developed by the age of 8. So we've got to get them while they're young. We've got to train them while they're younger. And we're going to talk more about this later. Sunday school teachers. Using our time, investing our time, taking it and investing in it. We ought to know what we're teaching. We ought to go over our lessons ahead of time and not wing it. We need to study and spend time studying it, find out what it says so we know how to apply it to our classes live. Satan, he's vying for our time and attention. He's got the television out there with a ton of garbage out there on the television. There's sports, whether it's on the television or whether it's playing it. There's YouTube. There's Facebook. Now, I'm not saying all these things are wrong and wicked, and you're wicked if you have a television in your house. But I am saying we ought to monitor our time on it. 1 Corinthians 6:12 says, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Okay? Is it wrong to sit there and watch television for 10 hours? Biblically, probably not. But is it expedient? Is it accomplishing anything? Is it doing any good for anybody? The TV people, and that's it, and they're ungodly. We need to be careful how much time we spend in these things. Satan's vying for our time and attention, but we ought to give God our time. We ought to devote time specifically to prayer and Bible reading each and every day. With our prayer lives, we need to develop a prayer list. Well, I don't know what to pray for, Brother Matt. Let me give you a list right here. Brother Valentine brought this up to me right before, during the singing, the music, our prayer list, we put it out. It's got names of people that need help. It's got our ministries of the church, special requests, people needing salvation. Take this home with you. We just don't print it so you can scribble in notes in the margins, wherever that you may find it. Take it home and use it. Pray for people on here. You can pray for our church. You can pray for our city. You can pray for my family. Pray for your family. Pray for my family. Pray for your Sunday school teacher. Pray for the Sunday school teachers of your children. Pray for the ministries of our church. Pray for our president. Pray for this next election. Devote time specifically to prayer and Bible reading. Make it a habit. Make it a part of your life. We ought to give God our time. That means when we come to church, we're giving God our time. Not necessarily. It's funny, sitting up there in the sound booth, at the beginning of the message, the preacher's preaching, and he's saying, turn to this passage right here. Usually around that time, I'll go and I'll stand on the balcony, and I'll start counting. And it's amazing, because just about in every section, I see someone, they've got a phone in their hand. Oh, they've got their Bible on their phone. Well, maybe. They might have their Bible on their phone. But I've yet to see a Bible app that's just pictures, and they move it scrolling up picture after picture after picture after picture, and it looks a lot like Facebook. When we come to church, we ought to give God our time here at church. Give it to God. When it comes to soul winning, if you're not busy on Saturday mornings, you don't have to work at 10 a.m., come out soul winning. Thursday evenings, if that works better for you, come out on a Thursday evening. If neither of those work for you, pull me aside, pull Brother Caleb aside, pastor aside, and say, hey, I'd like to learn how to soul win. Teach me how to go soul winning. Teach me what to say, what to do. Pull us aside, make it a habit in your life. Give God that time. Getting involved at church. There's several men, they've already signed up on the Welcome Center. I had someone come up to me during the Shake Hands song asking, hey, what tools do I need to bring for it? They're giving God their time to come put in these windows here. I mean, giving God for special occasions, for events, church work days. Get involved at church. Give God that time. He's given each and every one of us time, so we ought to take that time. It's something that He's given to us, and we're to be a good steward of it. Someday we're going to have to give an account to God for how we spend our time. So let's be wise about how we use it. So when he comes back, we can give a good report. Our time. How about our talents? You know, I'm amazed with Tim Tebow. His family, they were missionaries to the Philippines. He studied, when he came back to the States, he studied at the University of Florida, and he led the Gators to 2 national championships. You know, there's a lot of missionary kids. They're not known for athletics. Let me just say that. Tim Tebow, though, God just blessed him. He's got an amazing talent for playing football, and now I hear something about he's trying to play pro baseball. But Tim Tebow, he comes back from the mission field. He continues to live for God. He goes to the University of Florida, and they had to make a rule because of him. The media dubbed it the Tebow rule. And what it is, it's prohibiting messages in the black grease that goes under their eyes. If you remember, he's the one that put in John 3:16 under his eyes. And the next 24 hours, it was the number one on the search list, Google search list. Over 90 million people had searched up John 3:16. He's done a couple other verses too, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and others. God blessed him. He remembered God even in his while he's doing something he obviously loved and something God has given him a talent in. He went to the NFL. He played for the Denver Broncos, the New York Jets, the New England Patriots, now the Philadelphia Eagles. And you think of him, Tim Tebow, okay? When you think of him, he's not known as just a football player. Yes, he's known for football, but when you think of Tim Tebow, you think of a Christian football player. He's made that very clear. He's using his talents to honor God, and it's clearly seen. So we have to ask ourselves, where do our talents come from? It's a simple question, but when you really think about it, they came from God. God's the one who gave us those talents. 1 Corinthians 4:7, it says, "For who maketh thee to differ from another? And what hast thou that thou didst not receive? Now if thou didst receive it, why dost thou glory as if thou hadst not received it?" God gave us our talents. We're to use those talents for him. He gave us our talents to please him. One of my favorite verses, Revelation 4:11, if you want to know your purpose in life, this is it right here. Let me remember what it says. "Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive honor and glory and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created." Created all things. That includes you. That includes me. We were created for the sole purpose of pleasing God. So with our talents, we ought to take those and please him. Colossians 3:23 and 24, "And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. Whatever you do, do it as to the Lord." So we have our talents. Let me ask you about your talents. We think, how can talents be used in the church? How about preaching and teaching? Those are some of the obvious ones. We can use preachers and we can use teachers. There's a nursing home ministry that goes out, I think it's every other Sunday. We can use more preachers for that. They need help. We need preachers in junior church. We need more teachers for Sunday school. As God continues to bless and this building begins to fill up more, we need more teachers. How about singing? Maybe God's given you the talent of singing. Well, join the choir. Get involved. Talk to Brother Caleb about singing specials. Use the talent God's given you to honor him. What about playing an instrument? Man, it's neat watching people come up for offertories. And maybe my mom's there playing the piano, and they've got a flute or something, and they're playing together. That's one of the coolest things in the world. Or to see 3 or 4 flutes or brass instruments playing at the same time. If you have a talent that's playing an instrument, use it to honor God. How about this? What about the talent of being wise concerning electricity and mechanics? We got Brother Tom. He comes in. We had a problem with that light, and he's up there. He's working on it. He helped fix that. There's been issues with the van off and on, and he'll go out there, him and a couple others, Brother Ron and others, they go out there, they take their time and their talents, and they're using it to help out the church, to help out a ministry of the church? How about carpentry? You know, we've got several men signed up, like I said before, geared to help with the windows this Friday and Saturday. That's fantastic. That's great. What about someone that's tech savvy? If there's someone that's tech savvy, I mean, we need your talent. I had problems with this projector all during Vacation Bible School. We need your help. How about cooking? Someone's volunteered for at least one of the days, if I understand correctly, to bring in food while we're working on the windows. I mean, that's just a blessing. And there's others. What if your talent is writing? Hey, write a book that'll help people. Or write a novel, sell it, and be a blessing to the church financially. Or start a blog that'll help people. What about poetry? Hey, write a song that can be sung as a special. What about drawing? We have some of our teenagers here, and I'm very jealous of them because they are really great drawers. I'm not really jealous of them, but I'm so proud of them. I wish I had their talent. But they've drawn different pictures and given it to me as a present. I think they've drawn the icons for some of the Vacation Bible School teams. They're using their talents to please God. Decorating. They had a bridal shower for Miss Pamela this past Monday, and my wife came back home and she said, man, the ladies that decorated that, they did such a good job. I'm going to ask them to help for the ladies' extravaganza. I mean, whatever it is that your talent is, use it to the honor and glory of God. Some people have a talent for gambling. Get right with God. Don't do that. Whatever your talent is, though, take that talent and use it to honor and glorify God. Because someday we're going to have to stand before God. We're going to have to give an account for the way we used our time, but we're also going to give an account for the way we used our talents. Now, not everyone has the same talents. You know, we read in this passage how he gave some 5 talents, some 2 talents, and the talent that it's talking about is an amount of money, okay? But this can be applied to time, talents, you know, abilities, and also our treasures that we're talking about. But he gave 1 5, he gave 1 2, and he gave another 1 talent. And it says he gave it, how did it phrase it in that passage? As their, according to his several ability. He gave it according to how that man has proven himself in the past, how that man can handle it. And God's done the same thing with us. He knows what we're capable of. He knows the way our mind works. He's given each and every one of us talents to honor and glorify Him. As I was saying, not everyone has the same talents. You take cooking. I cannot cook. I've tried cooking before, and I burned rice, and then I tried to eat it, and it was still crunchy, and it was nasty. I don't have that talent. There's some people, they don't have the talents of singing. That's okay. The Bible says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. But we don't all have the same talents. Tim Tebow, he developed his abilities all the while using them to glorify God. He's known not just as a football player, but as a Christian football player. Let me ask, how are you known? How are you known? Are you developing your talents that God has given you? Charles Schulz, he's the comic, he wrote the comics Peanuts, you know, Charlie Brown, Snoopy. He said, I just lost it. He said, life is a 10-speed bike. Most of us have gears we never use. The talents God has given us, we need to take and develop them. If you don't know what your talent is, He's given each and every one of us talents. Find out what it is, and then work towards that talent. A book I'd like to recommend is Talent is Never Enough by John C. Maxwell. He writes some really good stuff. And he talks about developing your talent even more. So are you using your talents are you using the talents God has given you? Why did God give them to you if you're not going to use those talents for Him? There's a guy I worked with when I was in college. His name was Morgan. Morgan, you wouldn't know it by looking at him or talking to him, and I didn't find this out for several months, but he's a Christian, or at least he claimed to be. He's talking to me later on. He's telling me he was really good at baseball. He said scouts have checked him out. He could have gone pro. But he went to a game, and he's playing this game. Now, he says he's a Christian, but he doesn't act like it. I mean, the way he speaks, the way he looks, the things he talks about, he doesn't act like a Christian. And I can assume the way his attitude was, what it was back then. He goes to a game, and he's good enough to go pro, and pretty soon he's going to be making that decision. And in the game, he's running from one base to another, and he hears something tear, or he feels something that's not right, and he looks down, and he ends up tearing something in his knee. He can never play baseball again. And thinking about that later on, I'm thinking, you know what? Knowing him, he claimed to be a Christian, and the way he acted and his attitude and everything else, you know, I've come to the conclusion, I believe with all my heart, God gave him that talent and ability so that Morgan could honor God. But Morgan chose not to honor God with his talent, but to honor himself. And God said, if you're not going to honor me, I'm going to take it away from you. Why should God give us talents if we're not going to take those talents and use them for him? We ought to develop those talents and honor God with them. So our time, our talents, we ought to be a good steward of our treasure. The Bible says some things about treasure. The Bible would consider our family to be treasure. Our children. Psalm 127, 3 and 4 says, Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. You know, when I think about my children are, they are my most precious treasures, our children. We need to be training our children and teaching them the things of God. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. We need to make our children to come to church. We talked about this, I think it was Sunday night. We can't trust our children to nourish themselves physically. I know of a family that back in Peoria where my wife grew up at, their children, the children just eat what they want. The parents try and give them good food, but they always refuse it. And so now they're to the point they practically live on sugar. And we see him, and the son, his skin is so pale, and he's, you know, and I'm thinking, man, just take a paddle and spank the kid, make him eat it, don't let him have anything else. He'll learn. He'll starve. You know, he's not going to starve. He's going to eat something. Just make him. We can't trust children to nourish themselves physically. How can we trust for children to nourish themselves spiritually? To make those wise decisions? They can't. So you make the decisions for them. Have family devotions. Okay, well, I don't know how to have a family devotion. Well, first piece of advice, check out the bookstore for a family devotional book. I'm sure we probably have one, and if we don't, you talk to whoever's running the bookstore, you talk to my mom, and they can order one for you. Something else you can do is cover different character traits in the Bible. Respect, honesty, obedience. They're sure not learning these traits at school. Read Bible stories beforehand and pull out truths that you know your child needs or is dealing with at the time. And then in devotions, you go over those same stories. You ask your child, what did they get out of it? Talk about it with them and help them apply it to their life. But take time for family devotions. And then with your children, discipline them. Proverbs 23:13 and 14 say, withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with a rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with a rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. Well, that's not PC. That's not politically correct. There's books out there that say you shouldn't spank your child. I mean, people, they've got the PhD behind their name. Doctors, they say you're not supposed to spank your child. PhD, they went to 12 years of school or however long, or God who created the world, who's right. I think I'll go with what God says. Proverbs 29:15, the rod and a reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. Proverbs 29:17, correct thy son and he shall give thee rest. You ever see a parent, they just look so exhausted, their kid is like loud, and you want to go over and take over for that parent and like beat the snot out of that child, but you know you'd be put in prison so you don't. But you look at the parent, they're just exhausted, they're drained, and you just feel drained looking at them. It says, what did it say? I just read it. Correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. When we visit my wife's home church in Peoria, Illinois, people always compliment on how well our daughters are behaved. You know, I'm not trying to brag right now, but my daughters, they are, for the most part, pretty well behaved. And, you know, whenever they compliment my daughters, you know, I always think they didn't get there on their own. I mean, we spanked them. That's why they're so well behaved. At that same church, there's another family. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. You know, we don't just spank them and go wild and you know, and just start swinging a paddle. No, you got to have control. If you're angry, sometimes you got to walk away, come back to it at a later time and say, all right, you remember what you did? All right, I'm going to spank you for that. Sometimes that waiting period is worse. But you take them. There's a Pastor Allison who preaches here for the Super Conference. He gives advice. He says, slap yourself on the leg first. You know how hard it feels. And then you hit them the same amount. But you always hit yourself first. You feel how hard you're hitting them. And but after spanking them, I always remind them that I love them. I take them close to me. You know, I get them laughing a little bit, you know. But then I cover with them. You know, there's a phrase I've taught them. Oh, I say obey, and they'll say now. And we'll say it 2 or 3 times, and I'm teaching them, obey. You disobey, you get a spanking like you just got. But you obey, you won't get that spanking. Trying to teach them. There's another family there in Peoria, and their children, they're little devils. They don't spank their children. They don't correct them. They'll tell them 15 times to do something, and then after that 15th time, you know, they're talking to them, hey, you need to stop that. 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 And I'm sitting over there, and I'm just looking, you know, incredulous. You know, I'm just, I can't think of the word for it. I'm just like, seriously? You're not going to do anything about that? His son will come up and hit him and everything. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm just about covering my eyes. Don't do that. You need to sit down. Don't do that. And finally, after about the 15th time, he's like, I told you, you need to. And it's like, whoa, where did that come from? What's happened is he's not being consistent. Don't do that or I'm going to spank you. Don't do that or I'm going to spank you. His son's thinking, you just said that. You haven't spanked me yet. Don't do that or I'm going to spank you. No, you're not. Don't do that or I'm going to spank you. You're a liar. Don't do that or I'm going to spank you. And he's pushing the limit, and the parent's not doing anything about it. You know? My kids, and at times they can be little devils too, I promise you. But they'll push the limits too. And when I see that, sometimes it's funny, and I got to turn my head and, you know, not let my mom. We'll be up in the office, and my daughters will say something like ridiculously funny. And my mom, she's covering her mouth, she's turned away, she's walking out of the room. And I'm just about doing the same. I'm like, stop, sit down. You know, I turn my head, I do a little laugh, and I come back, and then I deal with them. They'll push those lines too, but when they come to that line and they cross it, then I'll spank them. They know I'm telling the truth. I'm not lying to them. I'm consistent with that. Sometimes as I'm dealing with my kids, I'll look at my wife's mom. She'll be there. And I'll see something on her face, and I'm not trying to put her down or anything like that. I love her to death. But I'll just see something there that maybe she doesn't quite agree with the decision I've made. She might not like it. She doesn't say anything about it. She doesn't try and correct me. But I can see, you know, she might not like it that I'm spanking her grandchild. But I can't let that deter me. See, the one responsible for training the grandchild, it isn't her. It's my responsibility. And she talks about how well-behaved her grandchildren are. Well, it's because of the actions I'm taking. She may not like it, but she enjoys the result of it. Then with our kids, we can spend time praying for them. Another treasure God's given us is our spouse. Proverbs 18:22, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. Now I've searched the scriptures, but I've not found anything where it says anything nice about a woman getting a husband. Cricket, cricket, cricket. You know, but A wife, you're a spouse, that's also a treasure. We ought to treat them not how they treat us, but how you would like to be treated. We ought to encourage them spiritually. We ought to be praying for them. Well, I love her. Okay, prove it. Pray for them. You ought to have devotions together with them. Well, you talked about having devotions and spending time in our Bible, and talking about family devotions, and then talked about devotions with our spouse as well. Yeah, you can't get enough Bible. Just get in God's Word. Encourage them. If they don't come to church regularly, encourage them to come to church. So our treasures, our family, but also our finances. We're going to have to give an account to God about our finances. So we need to be financially wise. That means we need to learn how to budget. Luke 14:28-30 says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation, and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build, was not able to finish." Proverbs 27:23 says, "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds." Dave Ramsey, he's wise financially. He has a podcast and a radio show and tons of books out there on how to manage your money, about how to be financially wise. One of his pieces of advice is this. He says, you ought to spend every penny on paper before you even touch that paycheck. I mean, you've sat down and, all right, we're allotting this much money for this, and we're spending this much money here. You've not even touched your paycheck yet, but you see where it's all going, and you see at the end of it, after savings, after everything else, I have this much money left that I can do with whatever I want. But you ought to spend every penny on paper first. We ought to learn how to budget. We ought to develop some common sense. That means shop around. When it comes to insurance, shop around for insurance. Well, I've been using the same insurance for 20 years. Look at other insurances. See if you can get better deals. I mean, just be wise about it. Have some common sense. With cell phone plans, well, we've been to, and I know you can't shop around to every cell phone plan depending on what your job might be or what areas you might go to, but learn about it. Investigate it. Find out. Shop around. Find the best prices. Try and get better deals. Any big or unusual purchase you're about to make, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's boots. I've seen my dad before. He's got like 3 or 4 tabs pulled up on the internet, and he's looking at boots, and he's looking at this boot right here. He's looking at the quality of it. He's looking at how much it costs. He looks at this other stuff. He looks at this one, and he's comparing the two, and he's looking at this one over here. Why is he investing so much time in researching boots? It's because he wants to get the most out of his money. It's because he wants quality, something that's going to last him without spending an arm and a leg for it. Research and investigate. Shop around if you're looking for a computer, even a coffee maker. Just take time and investigate it. Something else, developing some common sense. Stop being lazy. Don't eat fast food every single day. It's not wise financially, and it's killing you physically. If you spend $5 a day, 5 days a week, that equals $25 a week. Okay, $25, and that's just lunch Monday through Friday. That's not too bad. It's more than I'd like to pay, but it's not too bad. But then you start adding it up. You take that $25 times 52, that's 52 weeks in a year, and you're at $1,300 per year on garbage, unhealthy food. It's tearing up your body. It's hurting you physically. So instead, make lunch every day. Make eating out a rarity. Make it special. If you save that money, you save that money for a week and a half, the next week you can go out and take your wife out somewhere fairly nice, pretty nice, with that money that you just saved. And that's beneficial to you as a family. You're investing time in your relationship with her, and it's better quality food. Something else to have common sense about, buy generic when you can. Now, some things have to be brand name. With my daughter Talia, her diapers, they have to be brand name. I'll not go into that. Something else that have to be brand name is Oreos. I can't have generic Oreos. They're not the same. But other things, well, my mom, she's bought this peanut butter for, as long as I can remember. Well, check out other peanut butter. That peanut butter, that jar costs $4. Check out this $2 jar right here. What about laundry soap? Unless you have like my daughter has eczema, we have to be careful about even laundry soap we use. But unless there's some sort of skin condition like that, look at generic laundry soap. Do some investigating, comparing, and you'll save money. Popcorn, etc. Buy generic when you can. Evaluate your current expenses. Do you really need cable and Hulu and Netflix? I'd hate to have to answer to God for having all three of those. What about magazine subscriptions that you don't read or memberships? Something else when it comes to money, don't live to get rich. Proverbs 6:24 says, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, or God and money." Don't live to be rich. Live for God. And God, ask him to bless you, yes, but don't live for the money. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 6:10, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." You work so hard for money and you make that your goal in life to be rich. You'll do things 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you said, "I'll never do that." But now you're at this meeting and these guys are going to a bar, to discuss this meeting, and I wouldn't, but I've got to get that bonus. I've got to get that. And you go to that meeting and you're eating in a bar and they're drinking and they're making fun of you because you're not drinking, and so you decide to have a little something, and the love of money is the root of all evil. If you love money, you'll do anything to get it. Don't live for money. Get out of debt. Proverbs 22:7, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." Learn to save. Proverbs 21:20, it says, "There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up." Learn how to save. And then it comes to tithe and offering. If we have common sense, if we learn how to manage our money, which we're going to have to give an account for anyways, but we're doing some of these other things. Maybe we're cutting costs here. We have Netflix, Hulu, and Comcast, and a couple other things. We get rid of a couple of those. We're starting to save money. And before in your life, maybe you've said, "Man, I can't tithe. I don't see how." But you start living responsibly, taking care of these other areas. That's where the money's at. That's where God's tenth is. You've just been spending it in other places. If you don't tithe, we need to stop robbing God. Malachi 3:8-11, it says, turn there with me. Just a book, the book before Matthew, the last book of the Old Testament. Malachi chapter 3, and we're going to start in verse 8. It says, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, Wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me." There's a curse on those who don't tithe. A curse on those that are robbing God. Even this whole nation. "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house." One of the purposes of the tithes is to take care of the church. The necessities of the church, like electricity, insurance. The ministries of the church. The staff. The projects, building repairs, updating the building. Events such as Vacation Bible School, Super Conference, revivals. "That there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." That's an awesome promise right there. And if you've been tithing for any length of time, you can probably look right back at this passage and say, "I know what that's talking about." Me personally, and you've heard this, I'm not going to go into it again, but me personally, there's a time when I started to tithe, and I can look at this right here, and I'm nodding my head saying, "Oh yeah, man, if you don't tithe, you have no idea what it's talking about." But I do. I've been there. It's awesome. Let me read it again. Prove me now, herewith saith the Lord of hosts. God is challenging you. Hey, prove me. You don't believe me? Prove me. Try it. Test me. Just do it. If I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. He shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. He tells us to prove him. Is God a liar? We'll all say no, but what do our actions say? We ought to prove that God is not a liar by obeying him. We ought to step out on faith and obey him. He says he will rebuke the devourer. He can cause your bills to go down. He can cause you to have more money at the end of the week than your budget says you should. Well, how would he do that? I don't know. He's God. Just prove him. Test him. Try him. He can allow you to have a raise or even get a better job. And why? Why would he allow that to happen? Why would he allow that change? Because you decided, okay, God, I don't see how, but I'm going to obey you. And you take that step out on faith, and you proved him. And he's like, okay, now I can do something for you. All right, watch this. Because you proved him. We go back to Matthew chapter 25. We're at the parable of the servants. Verse 19, it starts out, after a long time the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, and I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant. Thou knewest that I reap where I sow not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The master, he came back from his long trip, and he took account of his servants. And the first one, he came and he says, Master, I've honored you. I've taken what you gave me. I've doubled it. I was a wise steward. He gives it back, and his master was pleased. The one who had the 2, he came and he said something similar. Master, I've done what you've asked me, or I've taken good care of this, and I've doubled it. I've been a wise steward of what you've given to me. And this last one, he took that money and he hid it in the earth. He digs it out, he brings it back, and I know that you're a hard man, but here, this is yours. And he was a poor steward. He didn't invest in it. He didn't use it. He wasn't wise with it. The thing is, someday God's coming back, and each and every one of us, we're going to have to answer to him, give an account for how we used our time, how we used our talents, our abilities, and how we used our treasures. We're going to have to give an account to him, and I want to be able to... He looks at this last servant, and he says, Thou wicked and slothful servant. Thou wicked and slothful servant. When he comes back, I don't want him to tell me that. I want him to say, Matthew, thou good and faithful servant. Matthew, I gave you time, and you used time for me. I give you talents and abilities, and Matthew, you developed those talents and abilities, and you used them to bring honor and glory to me. Matthew, I gave you treasures. I gave you a family. You didn't have much money, but I gave you this, and you used what you had. You honored me with it. You were wise, because really it's not ours, it's His. We're just stewards of it. We're just managing it. You took what was mine that I let you be a manager over. You're wise with it. You're a good and faithful servant. That's what I want God to tell me. We're going to have to give an answer for Him someday. 1 Corinthians 4:2, I'll close with this. It says, moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. We're stewards of what He's given to us. We're managers. We're to be managing it wisely. I gave this brief illustration Sunday night. You know, you walk into a restaurant, and the manager, he comes to your table. He's asking, how is everything? You enjoying your food? Is it good? The thing is, he's not the owner. He has a place of authority, but he's not the man in charge. The owner is. And someday that owner's going to come back, and the manager is going to have to answer, this is why that happened. This is why that happened, but I've been a good manager. I've managed this store, this restaurant wisely. We're just managers. So let's take what God has given us. Let's just manage it wisely. Dear Father,